experts have checked through the pictures of Russia's deadliest stealth jet, the Su-57, on the internet and are convinced that the jets have not been used in the war. This leaves many wondering what would happen if they did. As the war in Ukraine rages on, more experts are getting perplexed at Putin's plan as the mighty Su-57 stealth jets are yet to be seen in action. This is an aircraft built for air superiority and attack missions, and world powers were very afraid of what might happen if it was ever introduced into the war. As for the capabilities of this incredible fighter jet, we'll do justice to that in the video. However, before we get into all that, ensure to like this video and subscribe to the channel Military Technology Updates. How deadly is this jet? Sukhoi Su-57 stealth fighter jets are one of the Russian Air Force's most powerful military aircraft. They are used for missions requiring the military to defend from all air, surface, and ground enemy targets. They also serve to monitor airspace at longer ranges. Possessing a combat weight of 10 tons, this machine can load up air-to-surface missiles such as X-35, X-31, and more. It can also carry short-range air-to-air missiles, short and medium-range weapons, both guided and unguided. As if that wasn't enough, these fighters can also load up with aerial bombs as high as 1,500 kilogram classes. Its first flight was in 2010, and a couple of years later, they did more tests, even in Syria. It is to replace the Su-27 jets, which are 4th-gen fighters. As for the Su-57, it's a 5th-generation aircraft with twin-engine, a single seat, and multi-role capabilities. It was built and designed by Sukhoi, which is a subsidiary of United Aircraft Corporation. Like a stealth fighter jet, very few military aircraft can boast of higher maneuverability and speed, and the aircraft merges all this with a balanced operational feel and firepower. Quite frankly, this is not a plane you want to come face to face with because it will blow enemy units to pieces, whether at surface level or in the air. What's the origin of the jets? In 1979, the Soviet Union had a need to produce next-generation fighter aircraft that would be incorporated into military service by the 1990s. The need became a project codenamed the I-90. Among other requirements, the fighters had to be multifunctional. By multifunctional, they meant it had to have powerful ground attack capabilities. It was also scheduled to replace the MiG-29s too. Eventually, 2 programs were designed to meet the requirements made by the Soviet leaders. There was the MFI, which designed a multifunctional frontline fighter, and the LFI, which was a smaller version but also powerful. The journey to building one of the world's most deadly fighter jets began in 1983, with the plan being to produce 2/3 LFI and 1/3 MFI fleets. In 1983, Sukhoi began its program to develop next-gen jets technology. This development first led to the creation of the S-32, then the S-37, then finally the S-47. Not long after the fall of the Soviet Union, both MFI and LFI were eventually disbanded and the Russian defense had to start over on a new next-generation fighter program. Eventually, they got it right and now lay claim to one of the most powerful 5th-generation jets in the world. How was the aircraft designed? With many design options presented, the Russian military leaders eventually settled for the T-50's conceptual design in 2004. 5 years later, the aircraft's design was officially approved and the T-50 fighter jets were named Su-57 in 2017. The Su-57 fighter jet lays its emphasis on super maneuverability in all aircraft axes. It also boasts capacious internal payload bays to enhance its multi-role versatility. The sensors comprise advanced systems like the Active Phased Array Radar. The designer Sukhoi proclaimed the Lockheed Martin F-22 as the baseline for a super maneuverable stealth aircraft. So what is this aircraft built like? It has a wide-wing blended fuselage body with 2 engines spaced out wide apart. It also has moving stabilizers, both vertical and horizontal canted, for stealth. The plane's trapezoid wings possess leading ailerons, edge flaps, and flaperons. Su-57s also incorporate massive leading-edge root extensions and thrust vectoring. These help to shift the aerodynamic center forward, which in turn helps to increase static maneuverability and stability. The extensions mentioned earlier come with adjustable levcons, leading-edge vortex controllers designed to maintain the generated vortices, thereby providing trim and improving high angle of attack abilities. Also, the extensions aid recovery whenever the thrust vectoring system fails. Remember that from the onset, the idea was to build a multi-role aircraft. Thus, the Su-57 is imbued with enough internal payload capacity. The weapons are housed in tandem in twos in the main weapons bay. This is beside the large ventral volume between the spaced engines. You might also be interested to know that this is the first Russian military aircraft that focuses on stealth. To achieve this, the Su-57 makes use of a variety of techniques to lessen its radar signature. Just like the F-22 and the other effective stealth fighters, the Su-57 aligns its planform edges in a bid to lessen its radar cross-section. Both the trailing and leading edges of its wings, plus the control surfaces, as well as skin panel edges, are all delicately angled. This greatly reduces the radar waves reflecting in a number of directions. The antennae are also recessed from the plane's surface to preserve its stealthy shape, while the radar-absorbent material absorbs the radar emissions, thereby further reducing radar reflections. This should tell you that there's a huge chance that an enemy fighter might not detect this jet even when in range. As for the engines, the Su-57 runs on a pair of NPO Lyulka Saturn Izdeli augmented turbofans. The engines are advanced and highly improved variants of the AL-31. They produce 9 tons of dry thrust. The afterburner thrusts are 14.5 tons, while special emergency power thrusts are 15 tons. Now, these engines are fully integrated into the aircraft's control system, as they have full authority over digital engine control. This integration will help facilitate effective handling and maneuverability. All in all, the Su-57 was designed for air superiority and dominance, which is why it's bothersome and perplexing why it hasn't been utilized in the Ukraine war yet. Are there any upgrades? The Russians are indeed making plans for a Su-57M, which will be equipped with a more sophisticated engine from NPO Saturn. This new engine is going to take stealth capability and maneuverability to another level. Its design features an estimated dry thrust of 11 tons and 17.5 tons in afterburner thrusts. In addition to the expected higher reliability, performance, and costs, the new power plant will also reduce the aircraft's radar. The design is also expected to feature glass fiber IGVs, an infrared signature, and a fresh nozzle furnished with serrated flaps. Honestly, NATO and the US can hardly find comfort with the news of further upgrades being done to such an aircraft. But just as modern-day military warfare changes, so do the weapons that must be used. The reasons are simple. Whichever country fails to keep up will have itself to blame. Many nations would like to conclude that maybe the Russian military is not as powerful as it is believed to be, considering the way that the Ukraine war has dragged on. However, shrewd world fighters are aware that Russia is yet to use its full military might, despite the series of aids that have been given to Ukraine. The Russians have already taken Mariupol, and the Su-57 is still missing in action. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, Military Technology Updates. Let's get back to the video. Is Russia saving the Su-57 for bigger events? There is a lot of talk about the Russian Su-57 stealth fighter not being ready for combat yet. However, the world saw it in Syria, although it was in test mode then. The general consensus is that the machine is not ready for war in Ukraine, which would mean that Ukraine is in luck, except for the fact that the Russians are probably not using it because they don't need it to take Ukraine. Multiple observers have been shooting videos of what they consider to be the Su-57 fighters over Ukraine skies. These reports and videos remain unconfirmed. However, on February 24, an Indian media outlet categorically tagged the reports as false, since they were old footage and had nothing to do with the war. This is the reason why it is critical for people to be very careful with the information gotten over social media. Still, the question remains, will Su-57s ever be used in Ukraine? A Military Watch magazine report back in February disclosed that the Russian aerial combat order would most likely only involve Su-35s in Ukraine. The report stated that with multiple Su-35s, Russia should be able to ensure total air superiority over its Ukrainian counterparts within hours. The Su-35s had the potential to go as far as to deter Ukrainian fighters from even taking off. No one can tell how many Su-35s are in Ukraine, but either way, Putin's men are yet to seize control of the Ukrainian skies. Still, the fact remains that Russia does not need a Su-57 squadron to carry out a successful aerial campaign in the country. This is because of another fact, which is that the Ukraine Air Force is weak. They have about 125 fighter jets that are pretty old. The jets were inherited from the Soviet Union and they boast of no fifth-generation aircraft. Ukraine hasn't done anything to build its own fighter plane in decades, so really, there's no reason to have Su-57s there, especially if they're still in test mode. Does the world still fear Russia? Before Russia made the big decision to invade Ukraine, the US intelligence predicted that Moscow would launch a blistering assault on its neighbors and that it would quickly mobilize its large air power to dominate Ukraine's skies in little time. However, after the first 6 days, these people were left confused as they continued to witness Moscow acting way too delicately with its air power. These have left US officials dumbfounded as they have no explanation or response for what's driving Russia's risk-averse behavior. Could it be that they are weak, or could it be a strategy? It appears that Putin is not willing to take high risks with the jets or the pilots. To think that Ukraine's small air force, completely outmatched by Russia in terms of firepower and raw numbers, would still be flying is remarkable, and it is a fact that's still baffling military experts. The war has been stretched on for over a month now, with Russia raining bombs all over Ukraine's cities and towns, leading to over 800 civilian casualties. Many infrastructures were destroyed and over 3.3 million people have had to flee their homes. These traumatic events have led NATO to continue deliberations about leaving the sidelines and entering into the war. But till now, it's still deliberation. No action has been taken even with Russia supposedly looking weak. Many are starting to conclude that President Vladimir Putin's aim is not to desolate his neighbors. It's more about seizing control of the country, with regime change in mind. The truth remains that despite the shockingly poor military performance of Russia, the war isn't in its final stages. It's probably still in its early stages, and if it's possible to imagine NATO getting involved, then Russia would be wise to save its firepower for the bigger battle. With the deadly Su-57 nowhere to be found and Russia's intentions seemingly unclear, the US is not too eager to enter into battle with Putin. The simple truth is, among other things, the Su-57 jets are valid reasons for the world to still fear Russia. If you enjoyed watching this video, then leave a like and subscribe to our channel, Military Technology Updates. That way, you don't miss out on our next videos.